This is the last sort of section of the legalization chapter, and it's probably not as controversial, maybe more controversial. It's really a debate as to which is more controversial, prostitution or illegal drugs. But the reality of the matter is, both are very. I guess illegal drugs are probably a little bit more prominent. The business is a little bit bigger, and it's as far as I know, I don't want to say a lot more violent because they're both pretty violent. I just think it's a different scale. Both involve crossing borders and violating human rights and all sorts of stuff that is just bad. Anyway, I'm not going to argue it which one's worse or anything. I don't think it really matters. The point of the matter is that illicit drugs and the war on drugs is a very, very large problem in our society today that a lot of people don't really pay attention to. Unfortunately, a lot of people these days are more concerned about, celebrity gossip. And if you look back and you think about prohibition and how completely and utterly that failed, a couple of the reasons why it failed is, for one, just like prostitution and gambling, people are going to want to drink. People are going to want to do drugs. No matter what you do, if something exists, somebody's basically going to want to do it. Unfortunately, until you can, I guess, and there's a lot of reasons why people abuse drugs. Sometimes I think the great majority of the reason is for abuse, not so much just casual use, is just stressful life events. Sometimes life can be really fucking hard, and until you can do something about that on a large scale, it's all but impossible to eliminate the use of illicit substances and even kind of legal substances. One thing I'd like to start talking about, I just mentioned this before, but prohibition and the war on drugs, they're kind of the same thing. And we already really have a good example of why one didn't work. I don't really know why we've held on for so long to the other one. And obviously, there's a larger view that I guess people think that drugs are worse than alcohol. But unfortunately, that is almost completely not the case. Alcoholism is like the number one substance abuse problem. I think it's responsible for way more deaths, way more accidents, fatalities than any other illicit drug anywhere. So I don't mean to downplay illicit drugs, but it really is a very minor type of issue that just pales in comparison to other things that are a lot worse, legal things like alcohol and smoking. All right, so what a lot of people might not realize, I'm just gonna kind of be really fucking blunt about this, unfortunately. Hopefully, you're all adults and you understand, but supporting drugs being illegal, you're basically supporting increased prison overpopulation, violence, murder, theft, all sorts of terrible things that go along. And let me explain that a little bit to you. The war on drugs has done a pretty good job to add to the penalties across the board of using, dealing substances. And one of the unfortunate side effects of that is our prison population has just exploded. It's been the one thing that's been pretty constant over the years of growth and prison conditions, and people don't want to think about that. That's why I have a whole chapter after this all about prisons. Prison overpopulation is a really big problem. One of the major contributing factors to that is the illegal drug trade. Another one of the major things that you're, I guess, supporting, and well, hold on, let me put it this way, let me break it down to you. If you're supporting keeping drugs illegal, you're just basically making yourself want to pay more taxes because your taxes are what goes into the prison system. That being said, moving on, the violence. Not only at our borders, I'm sure a lot of you are just well aware of Mexican drug cartels and all that other violence and whatnot that happens at our borders near Mexico. And I don't think there's a lot of violence up in Canada. They're pretty cool people, but people die, they get beheaded, they get strung up and hung from bridges, and you don't really see a lot of that. I don't know whether it's people just they don't sensationalize those things. I don't know why not. I mean, you hear like one or two things, but that stuff goes on like every day. I watched something on the news the other day where, gosh, I think it was a city in Mexico that actually celebrated the fact that there hadn't been a drug-related murder in like 2 weeks. Like, it was literally celebrating that because I guess on a normal basis there's like hundreds, like every month or something like that. That's fucking disgusting. It's terrible. It's good for them that they're celebrating it because there wasn't any, but the fact that they need to celebrate it, I think, is terrible. Just the drug dealer on drug dealer violence, the drug dealer on customer violence, the customer on drug dealer violence, any sort of cartel, gang, type of territory battles or whatever it is that goes down on that side type of violence. It's just this whole world of violence, and it is very profitable. It's very violent. I think I've said that. It's also completely unnecessary, and it accounts for a lot of crime in this country that it just isn't needed. So if drugs were legalized, that's one standpoint, that it would take away a lot of the violence. I guess next I'd like to get into sort of the profit margins. Like I said earlier in the video, drugs are very hot commodity these days. You never know who does drugs around you or what, but apparently it's pretty freaking common. And a lot of the main concerns about legalizing drugs is that they think that it's just going to make people into addicts. And I really don't think that's true. I think if you set up a system where you educate people, kind of like a make the legal doing drugs age 18, and you have to basically complete like a DARE program kind of thing, and maybe a specific class dedicated just to the drug that you're taking, just so that everybody knows exactly what it is that they're getting into. I think that would be a huge, huge advantage for those people, just to get the information. Sometimes people might even just get the information and say, whoa, yeah, fuck that. I'm not going to do that drug. Just because, I mean, they wanted to try it before, and until they really realize what it was about, and then they might not want to try it anymore. Or they'll use it just casually, like most, I'd say 90% of the people that use drugs just do it casually. So the thought that it's just going to turn everyone into drug addicts really isn't the case. And what some people think when you think about legalizing drugs is that they're just going to be like, okay, they're legal, do whatever you want. But that's not really what I think is good for everyone else. Like I said before in one of my other videos, one of the biggest problems with addictions is finding the people that have the problem. And I personally believe that the best way to legalize drugs and to capitalize the most on their use and sale and distribution and ensuring that people are the safest is for the federal government to actually produce, manufacture, distribute the drugs themselves. That people might not like that, honestly, but if the United States decided to do this, our deficit would it would go away pretty soon. So, for one, having the government regulate something like this and grow it, it would give a very good security standpoint. The farms that grow the raw materials, the labs that produce any type of the synthetic materials or extract any of the materials from them would be federally protected by National Guard, whatever type of military facility or whatever that they would end up being, like a federal facility. They'd be completely protected, and they'd be tested and ensured for purity. So one of the problems with doing illicit drugs is you don't know what the fuck is in that shit half of the time. Another way is like sharing needles type of thing. I mean, that would be complete, like needle exchange type of thing. Would basically make sure that you have clean materials every time, and it would also track usage. And I know that sounds kind of bad, but it's really, like I said a couple seconds ago, it's very difficult to track people to see if they have a problem or not. And this is one way that you'd be able to ensure that you know exactly who was using too much. Maybe you can get them into a program, and a lot of the profits that you actually make from something like this can go back into treatment programs. And I think I said this before on the prostitutions one, but you're not going to go around to the side corner and see a drug dealer handing out pamphlets to help you quit doing drugs, because that shit's not going to happen. But in this case, a lot of the funding and the initial boost that you would need to get into that program like that would already be covered. I mean, your continued patronage would, I guess, be rewarded in the form of rehab. I know that sounds really bad, but anyway, there's other things that you can do to help limit people's ingestion and make sure you control stuff like that. Like a lot of the harder substances can be controlled by limiting the distribution. For one, you can just have them take it at the place only, and then just have like a, like a being high room, I guess, with just a whole bunch of cots where you can just lay down and enjoy yourself or whatever you wanted. I don't know how you enjoy being high, whatever. But if you ended up letting people take it home with them, you can have stuff like this. It's basically like a Pokeball kind of thing, but it holds an illicit drug, and it kind of locks it in there, so you have to like put them all together so that you can't use all the drugs that they gave you at one time. You basically just have to spread it out. So to use it, you'd have to connect them all together, type in your little code, thumbprint, and boom, you get your thing of drugs, and then these things are reset to like 8 hours later or 10 hours later or whatever, just to do everything that they can to help prevent you from overdosing. This is just a little suitcase that you can go in there with, and you can put them all in there and get your dose for the week. They can put them in these machines or whatever that would open them up, and you wouldn't be able to open these up or close them again afterwards. So that would be one way of protecting people from getting illegal drugs off the street and maybe putting them in these containers. Or because I mean, you'd have to regulate who and which drugs are legal, which drugs aren't legal. So this is one way to identify the legal ones. Either you do it in store or you carry around in these that are personally identified, with your codes and your names and everything, so you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff going on. Since I talked about safety a little bit, either doing the drugs like in store or keeping it safe and identifying the legal ones, before I get into this, I'd like to say that people are like, okay, well, if you're going to control people's doses and whatnot, well, what's to prevent them from just having a friend buy their dose and just give it to them? Well, if you're doing the drugs, and you could always implement a testing system. Obviously, if you have the funds backing because you're the one producing and selling all the drugs, you'd have, I don't want to say unlimited amount of funds, but you'd be able to have a drug testing program. If someone was suspected or thought, or if you just want to do it randomly, you can always just drug test them to make sure that they're the ones that's actually doing the drugs. If it's not in their system and it should be, it's like, okay, well, we have your little box thing. It says exactly when you took it, so it should still be in your system at this point, but it's not, so you're fucked at that point. There's a little control right there, just for you people that are worried about it, people selling to other people or whatever. But so moving on into safety, I had this kind of weird idea that is just like my stupid sex theme park kind of idea before, but it's basically like I don't know, like a drug play zone, I guess, and it's kind of more focused on hallucinogens, only because, I mean, you can have clubs. I mean, you can have these facilities attached to clubs to distribute party drugs like ecstasy and cocaine or whatever, and then have them attached to a club, and then just, make sure you control the temperature and you have people monitored so you know what drugs they took, and stuff like that, just to make it safer for those people. But at this one facility would be specific for hallucinogens or any kind of thing like that, just to, I guess, increase the effect so that you'd be able to do lower doses and still trip out pretty bad or pretty good. And I guess it's kind of like, if you ever seen the movie Alice in Wonderland, you would basically have like a warehouse, and you put it together like it was a movie set, like a Alice in Wonderland movie set, like with crazy big trees and like animatronics, and all the safety personnel are in costume, and you'd basically you go into the facility, you do the waivers and make sure you had your training done and everything like that. They'd verify that, then you pay your money, you do your dose, and then you go into the place. Obviously they'd make sure you're hydrated and whatnot. They'd check your levels and stuff. Maybe there'd be like on-site EMTs, I guess, to make sure you're okay in there. But then once you get in there and you actually start to hallucinate, you're actually in the environment of your hallucination. And they can have several different places. I mean, they could have like a Tron one, Alice in Wonderland, any, like, what's a new movie? Avatar. They can have like a jungly Avatar type of setting in there. Any number of things they can have, these facilities, to where you can go and you can really just experience things. And then later on, when you're finished, or if something happens, you can have one of the safety people pull you out, pull you aside, take your vitals, give you water, make sure you're doing okay, monitor you for like an hour or whatever, just whatever safety protocols you would want to put in there. It would just be just a safe environment that you can go, you can do your thing, and you don't have to worry about it. You can just enjoy yourself because hopefully you're going to be protected. I think that would be pretty cool, just because I probably still wouldn't use it, but I don't do drugs, but you're making available these facilities for these people to be safe and to do their thing. And I didn't really go over this, I probably should, but real quick, the drugs that I'd like to legalize aren't necessarily 100% all of them that are illicit and out there now, but for sure I think obviously marijuana would be one of them. Ecstasy, cocaine, probably one of the hallucinogens like LSD or something like that could go in there. It could be taken up to like a safety vote depending on which ones hurt you the most, that cause dependence the easiest. And the whole point of it would basically be to hurt the illegal drug industry as much as you can. So you would try to get the most used ones to be legalized so that you can get rid of all the crime and all the illicit parts of it, on the other hand, and while keeping everybody else safe. So there's that.